Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I call the meeting to order. We shall now continue our consideration of Agenda Item 9 on policy issues for the Asia-Pacific region, theme topic for the 74th session of the Commission on Inequality in the era of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Our session this afternoon will focus on multilateralism in Asia and the Pacific to promote inclusive economic and social development in the region and its contribution to global economic governance. I should like to mention that this discussion is being webcast live. And so we welcome to all those who are connected to us virtually. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this session will discuss the role of multilateralism in Asia and the Pacific to address inequalities and promote inclusiveness, and its contribution to global economic governance, particularly in light of targets contained in SDG 10, 16, and 17. Today's deliberation will also focus on the contributions Asia and the Pacific can make to promote inclusive global and regional economic governance to pursue the 2030 Agenda, and what can be done to reinvigorate global and regional multilateral approaches to promote economic and financial stability for the prosperity of its people. Again, we have the privilege of having a few speakers to lead off our discussion. And afterwards, the floor will be opened for country statements. But before we give the floor to our speakers, may I invite the Executive Secretary to deliver some introductory remarks. Madam
Thank
Secretary.
you, Madam Chair. It's really an honor and privilege today for me to speak for one particular reason. We have the former Prime Minister of Korea here with us, who is a great believer in multilateralism. Also, I'm honored to have two fellow former governors of central bank here from Pakistan and India together. So what I say can be obviously corrected by all three of them among all the other speakers. Multilateralism was brought to this platform as an integral part of the Commission because we were going to discuss inequalities. It's not because we don't believe in multilateralism and globalization or global governance. We believe in all three to be essential ingredients for the 2030 Agenda. But what is important is to get clarity of understanding what ails multilateralism and what are the anticipated issues that we see in terms of if things go wrong midway through, what would be the implications for it? The state of course, multilateralism today stands at a critical juncture in my view. But while multilateralism is increasingly under strain, economic regionalism in Asia Pacific has surged. Mutual economic ties have dramatically deepened as regional production networks have expanded and diversified, and intra-regional trade and investment flows have increased. Asia Pacific now commands over 1/3 of global GDP, yet impressive economic and social successes in many Asian economies have come without commensurate gains to their positions within multilateral institutions. Global governance frameworks have been shaken and led to constructive calls to address some of the complications created by what I would call unguarded globalization. These include, of course, rising inequality of income, wealth and opportunity within countries, a subject matter at the heart of this Commission's deliberations. 2, weaknesses of financial globalization, as evident from the recurring global and regional systemic crisis, as arbitrage is common and often not corrected, and the financial regulatory regimes remain fragmented as things have been happening in piecemeal. A struggling multilateral trading regime is another reason it is not being allowed to address the non-compliance of trading partners with agreed multilateral rules. As it is, that was difficult to agree on multilateral rules, but nobody is being held to task for abandoning those principles. Nor has it been enhanced to deal with new challenges facing global value chains, for instance, which is very different from plain vanilla bilateral value chain, or even for that matter, rapid technological advances. A fourth element is really the higher propensity of capital mobility relative to labor mobility and the resulting imbalances and tensions. Labor movements are very visible, while money comes and goes, of course, until investigated later on. And of course, climate change, triggered by increased environmental stress and a rise in emissions. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing for Development, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change have together heralded a new global compact focused on combating poverty and inequality. This global agenda advocates resilience, inclusiveness, and sustainability by ensuring policy consistency and coherence to harness economic, social, and environmental synergies in an increasingly interconnected world to promote shared prosperity. A backlash against globalization and a lack of trust in multilateral architecture and institutions pose a major risk to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Improving global governance through enhanced multilateral mechanisms is critical to achieve it. This calls for renewed empowerment and effectively dealing with an accountability deficit. Recent global changes in trade and finance, as well as climate change, have created a sense of urgency to catalyze effective collective action. Many countries have their role and engagement in international dialogue and institutions, and it is incrementally growing. Of course, there are several international forums where this question is debated. There are also new regional institutions, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which was established some time back, but I think now it's shaping up. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the New Development Bank, and new initiatives such as the China's Belt and Road. These have injected fresh impetus into global and regional cooperation efforts, and they have gone global despite the fact that all these initiatives I have talked about, their seeds have been sown by our leaders in Asia. On the trade and investment front, both the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, and the Regional Economic Partnership will help consolidate overlapping trade agreements and uphold the multilateral trading system despite rising protectionist sentiments. This can of course only happen if our regional leaders are able to come together, conclude the RCEP, the RCEP, but also to understand that these all need to be consolidated, these agreements. To protect the multilateral trading system, we need to pursue a form of globalization that is more open, inclusive, and fair, subscribing to principles of solidarity and sustainability. Multilateralism can prevail in trade, finance, and combating climate change as evident on a number of fronts. First, the recent success of WTO trade facilitation agreement, which along with many of the Asia and the Pacific plurilateral trade agreements, should contribute to enhancing WTO multilateral trading system. This calls for members to embrace more agreements on non-discrimination, transparency, and predictability of rule enforcement. Open, plurilateral, and sectoral agreements negotiated transparently inside the WTO that lead to multilateralization of commitments should also be the new norm for multilateral trade diplomacy. Second, in the face of rising protectionist trade policies, Asia-Pacific countries should first come more closely to the defense of WTO's dispute settlement mechanism by refusing unilateral retaliatory actions and instead building alliance with other WTO members and preserving the spirit of international cooperation. We all heard the WTO Director General very recently at the Central Executive Board meeting of United Nations, convened by the Secretary General. He desperately needs your support now. Switch priority from negotiation to liberalization, from negotiation of liberalization, which is happening already, to now what I would call rule setting and enforcement of the rules in place. And nurture this and strengthen regional and plurilateral institutions and agreements, providing intergovernmental platforms to build consensus to reduce capacity gaps on trade-related matters among the countries of the region. Third point that I'd like to make, related to my opening issues that I had talked about, is the issue of the oversight of financial globalization. Through effective regulation and supervision, of course, we have countries that have a mixed record of regulatory institutions, some very strong, some relatively weak, some are doing okay. But what's not there at all is who's doing the real oversight of financial globalization. And somebody will turn around and say it's the G20, it's the IMF, World Bank. But strictly speaking, of course, there are certain reports that come out from these institutions. But if things were working, we wouldn't be through so many recurrent crises. And I was in midst of 1997 Asian financial crisis, and it took a lot of effort to rescue a number of countries in our belt. That is why I think our region became stronger, because it really invested a lot in regulation and supervision to withstand, of course, the subsequent crisis. So effective regulation and supervision has to include prudent use of capital, flow management, and deployment of proper measures. A sound and diversified, well-regulated domestic financial system, I believe, should precede regional and global financial integration, because globe is a sum of the nations. Balancing domestic policy priorities and politics against a more integrated and open global economy is difficult, but it is a prerequisite for shaping the future of financial globalization and multilateralism. A pluralistic approach which recognizes and respects the priorities of individual countries and accommodates and realigns regional and sub-regional arrangements should be encouraged. Moreover, governance of financial globalization and its institutions should be in sync with rising multipolarity as we have witnessed over the last 70 years, including the economic rise of Asia and the Pacific. I witnessed firsthand as Sherpa of the United Nations in the G20 process how long it took to get the voice of our region effectively calibrated within these institutions. A fourth area that I promised to talk about was the Paris Agreement on climate change. It has indeed provided a new impetus for multilateral approach to steer execution of climate change accord. However, for it to be achieved, ambition and compliance need to be strengthened. Pledges must be regularly upgraded and substantial transparency introduced so that compliance can be monitored. We do have to shoulder a huge amount of responsibility in our region to make Paris Accord be success, because we are responsible for bulk of the emissions in our region. International finance, technology, and capacity building should be delivered to realize these ambitions. Strengthening compliance entails countries acting to punish those that fail to make serious commitments or renege on those they have made. Finally, a better socio-economic and environmental case should be made for opportunities contained in the Paris Agreement, led nationally defined contributions to public, businesses, and other stakeholders, in addition to donor communities. I feel when I go to countries and talk to people who haven't been on the United Nations platform or other platforms, have not been brought up to speed what it all means for the humanity. A common metric is needed to monitor collective progress towards requisite emissions reduction, both by states and signatories of the Paris Agreement. This will also help non-state actors create a clear connection between their reduction efforts and the NDCs, and thus enable the NDCs to better gauge collective progress. Such a common metric is also important to enabling internationally transferable mitigation outcomes as foreseen by the Paris Agreement to take off as cost-effective, efficient solutions to achieving the NDCs. So, of course, I can't narrate to you all what is in the report that has been released yesterday, but let me conclude. To successfully deliver on sustainable development globally, Asia and the Pacific, as you know, I've talked about, is moving very slowly and weakly. So one, it should shoulder its own responsibility of SDGs, but it can play a very critical role as it is standing today doing so. But we need to have the voices heard and views reflected in global economic and financial architecture commensurate with the rising economic weight. ESCAP, as your regional partner and of the United Nations in Asia Pacific, is of course positioning itself to support the member states and strengthen their role in global governance frameworks through sharing the knowledge as we are doing now. Member states can leverage our intergovernmental platform to coordinate and develop proposals to do so in submissions to the global platform. These solutions are critical to ensure our region can effectively deliver on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So our report on Asia and the Pacific's role on multilateralism and global governance, released in midst of the Inequality report and the technology, the Frontier Technologies session, which is to follow tomorrow, is really few of the first contributions which come to you in an integrated fashion, because all these are interrelated issues. Thank you for being here, and once again I want to express my special thanks to some of the leaders who are still here with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. Now we move to our special speakers. May I invite Dr. Han Seung-soo, the envoy, Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and Water, former President of the 56th session of the United Nations General Assembly, and former Prime Minister of the Republic of Korea, to share some perspectives on this topic.
Her Excellency, Madam Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to be invited to speak to you on inequality at this auspicious 74th session of the ESCAP's high-level ministerial segment. I would like to thank the ESCAP for their kind invitation. On hearing the news that Madam Executive Secretary would soon leave the post, I would also like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to her for her long distinguished service to promote the ideals of the United Nations in the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you very much for your service. Ladies and gentlemen, inequality is one of the greatest challenges of our time. Both developed as well as developing countries face inequality as a major policy challenge today. Inequality can arise from a broad range of political, social, economic, environmental, and even technological factors. In most instances, inequality is characterized by the lack of access to resources, including social services such as education, health, as well as economic resources. With the rapid development of technology and on the doorstep of the fourth industrial revolution, the technological transformation would begin to increasingly impact on income distribution within and among nations. Ladies and gentlemen, Sustainable Development 10 is specific on reducing inequality within and among nations. However, that goal has a cross-cutting issue, having strong links to other SDGs, such as poverty, hunger, health, education, empowering women, water and sanitation, inclusive growth, and even climate change. Overall, the Agenda 2030 is a groundbreaking push to tackle inequality, as it addresses inequality as a standalone goal and the cross-cutting issues important to the achievement of all SDGs. At the global level, SDG 10 emphasizes the importance of improving regulation and monitoring of global financial markets and institutions, as financial crises have been key drivers of income inequality. In Asia, according to the ADB study, after 50 years of progress since the mid-60s, millions of people had received no more than modest gains. In many Asian countries, Gini coefficient had been rising, implying society were becoming more unequal. For example, between the mid-1990s and 2000s, Gini coefficient of Asia as a whole increased from 0.39 to 0.46, or by 1.4% a year. Inequality can be significant sources of political and social instability and conflict. This can derail political processes and lead to the exclusion of certain social groups. Inequality is also an important moral issue, as it can significantly alter the degree of people's individual progress in society, as well as the society as a whole. Therefore, the policy-wise solution to address inequality needs to tackle drivers of inequalities, including those in the social, economic, political, environmental, technological domains. Universal access to public services, irrespective of age, gender, disability, race, ethnicity, religion, or economic and other status is a key component of effectively tackling inequality. Ladies and gentlemen, coming from a country that used to be one of the world's poorest until the early part of the 1960s, heavily relying on international aid and foreign assistance, but now joined the big league of industrial nations, I think there are three lessons to be learned from Korea's experience in inequality. First, the high growth rate matters in income distribution in developing countries, albeit with a set of proper policies. Korea's income distribution improved during the period of fast economic growth until the Asian crisis of 1997. Second, the international financial crisis proves to be a critical driver in causing the increase of inequality. The displacement in the distribution income in Korea, that is, sudden shift toward inequality, incurred twice after the Asian crisis of 1997 and the international financial crisis of 2008 after the collapse of the Lehman Brothers. Third, an aid recipient country can turn into aid donor country, contributing to reduce income inequality among nations. There is no reason why once a developing aid recipient country cannot succeed to transform itself to a donor country. Korea became a member of OECD in 1997 when I was Deputy Prime Minister and joined the Development Assistance Committee in 2010, transforming itself from an aid-receiving developing country to a donor country. Korea is the first developing country that transformed itself from an aid receiver to donor. In my capacity as Prime Minister, I was personally able to play a crucial role in planning to increase Korea's ODA during the long-term budgetary strategy session in the summer of 2008 so that we could triple ODA by 2015. The ODA amounting to US $696 million in 2007 reached $1,965 million in 2016. I would like to see several more developing countries cross the barrier between the receiver and donor, contributing to reduce the global inequality among nations. Ladies and gentlemen, while the speed and breadth of Korea's economic transformation are often recognized, the success of Korea's development model also lied in its foundation on its concurrent focus on social inclusiveness. The point is that economic growth is a way and key to unlocking human potential and development, but it must be accompanied by a serious measure to distribute the impact of income and wealth. For example, the new community movement, so-called 새마을 movement, launched in Korea in 1970, sought to rectify the growing difference in income distribution and living standards between the stagnant rural areas and rapidly industrializing urban cities. Korea also introduced a comprehensive medical insurance system early in 1977. It's a very remarkable achievement. As a result of such conscious efforts, Korea had been free of fundamental social exclusion resulting from large-scale poverty, entrenched income inequalities, unequal access to education and health, or deep-seated gender discrimination. Korea had become a model for the fast-growing developing economy with income inequality under control. Thus, it is generally accepted that Korea's income distribution continued to improve during the rapid growth of its economy between 1960s and 1980s. For example, Korea's income distribution remained fairly equal, with the Gini coefficient of the urban household remaining around 0.24 to 0.25 until the financial crisis of 1997. It then increased to 0.30 in 1999. It again showed to 0.32 in 2009, the highest Gini coefficient ever registered until then. In this respect, it is important to emphasize the crucial role of international financial institutions in correctly regulating and stabilizing the global financial system. As it is the developing countries that are particularly vulnerable to the external shocks arising from international financial crisis with negative spillovers of inequality, there is one more important reason that a properly managed regulatory mechanism should be in place in order to protect the developing countries from the series of external financial shocks. Ladies and gentlemen, before closing, I would like to say a few words on the impact of globalization on inequality. It is well known that at the time of the Asian financial crisis, Korea was imposed by the IMF with very severe conditions for its liquidity support. The gist of advice was more globalization, that is, to completely liberalize the financial market and abide by globalized financial standards. One might recall that at the time of financial crisis, there were two totally different policy options carried out, one taken by Korea and the other by Malaysia. To comply with the request from the IMF, Korea adopted an open liberal policy to deal with the financial crisis. Malaysia, on the other hand, experimented with the diametrically opposed different policy option, that is, a closed policy and tight capital control in dealing with the Asian crisis, financial crisis. Korea represented the views of the neoliberalists, whose argument is that globalization leads to a higher level of economic development, and that this will ultimately provide a sounder basis for economic growth, political democracy, and human rights. On the other hand, Malaysia represented the views of the structuralists or anti-liberalists who argued that globalization would intensify the foreigners' penetration of trade and capital in peripheral economies, leading to exploitation of human capital and natural resources. They argued that this would lead to further inequality of income and wealth within and among nations. It is very ironic that both Korea and Malaysia recovered from the financial crisis and they rejoined the mainstream of the world economy in due course. This leads us to think aloud how we should respond to the stringent requests of the international institutions that govern globalization. To find out the redistribution impact of the recovery policy, I checked with a time series of Gini coefficient in Korea and Malaysia respectively during the period of Asian financial crisis. I found out somewhat puzzling fact. As I have already said, Korea's Gini coefficient in 1997 was 0.26 and 0.30 in 1999. Thus, Korea's income distribution is shown to have deteriorated during the financial crisis. Malaysia's Gini coefficient, on the other hand, was 0.49 in 1997, but was 0.46 in 2004. Unfortunately, there is no official OECD statistics or comparable Malaysian Gini coefficient to 1999. But on the whole, it shows amazingly that Malaysia's income distribution improved during and after the Asian financial crisis, or at least it has not deteriorated as in the case of Korea. What does this mean? These simple statistics seem to show that liberalization, globalization policy worked against Korea's income distribution, while Malaysia's non-liberal anti-globalization policy improved or at least did not work against income distribution. This may need, of course, a further research and investigation. However, at this critical juncture in world economic history, the beneficial impact of globalization in recent years should not be discounted in any way, but at the same time, the dividing forces of globalization, the major concern, particularly of the underprivileged nations and individuals, should be seriously taken into account. This is how globalization can remain as a force for good. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Han, for sharing your valuable perspectives. May I invite to the podium now Dr. Yaga Venugopal Reddy, former Governor of the Reserve Bank of India and the Chairman of the 14th Finance Commission, to deliver his remarks.
Respected Chair, Governor Shamsad Akhtar, once a governor, always a governor, if I may say so. Distinguished participants, at the outset I would like to express my gratitude to the Executive Secretary and ESCAP for giving me this opportunity to be with you. The subject is of great interest to all of us. It is multilateralism, the role of Asia-Pacific region. There are three broad areas identified: trade, finance, and climate change. I will confine my comments to the subject I am less ignorant. Basically, I would like to submit that we have gone ahead with globalization without a global currency. So that is the problem of the global money. Then we have also the issue of global financial system, which emanates in a way out of the money, and also because of the fact that the finance has become global, the regulation remains national. And so that's the second proposition I want to explain. The third that I want to find out is that as a result there are problems with currency, and then there is a global financial system is being sidelined, and then by past I'll explain to you what it is. And then given this problem, whether our international financial architecture is in a position or equipped to handle this challenge. And I want to express some doubts about it, both in terms of the progress since the global financial crisis and in terms of its inherent capacities. And finally, I would conclude saying that the future is going to have several new balances. Money and finance is important, it is critical, but it will be part of a lot of new balances in the world. And these new balances have to happen rapidly, quickly, and in this whole process of new balances, Asia-Pacific region has both a stake and has to make an important, most critical contribution in the history of the world. So this broadly is what I'm trying to explain. First, I try to say that it's called my currency, your problem. Yes, this is what was told when in the 1970s. So the problem is that US dollar is the currency of US government. Or US by law, the Federal Reserve has to conduct money supply, have the dollar produced, supplied, keeping the interests of US nation. That's the legal requirement. But we are using the US currency as a global currency. And therefore, in a way, what US is saying is, you are using my currency, so it is your headache, it's not my headache. And that still remains. And as you know, one of the reasons for 2008 global financial crisis is this reason, because the debt could be incurred by USA, etc., you know that. Now the question is, what are the alternatives? After the global financial crisis, people realized that there's a huge cost to pay, and we have to consider alternatives. And these have been considered. And apart from various debates, we had a Stiglitz Commission, and they recommended, the commission of which I was a member, a new global reserve system. Then there was another Palais Royal, the French Palais Royal initiative, in which many of the central bankers, including me, we met, and we said, no, it's better to use the SDR and IMF and try to build something like a global currency. But actually, nothing much has happened so far. Now, what is it that happens because of this? Is that okay? Has it changed? Yeah. And now, as a result, now people are the way it is being presented is that we are heading towards a crisis, and this is by two former senior BIS officials, and who said that the way G7 policies are going on in terms of the debt, not only the public debt, but the corporate debt, the leverage, the G7 policies are irresponsible, and a revolution is required. Otherwise, the crisis is inevitable. Why? The problem is, on the one hand, G7 is going through inappropriate monetary fiscal policies. At the same time, US dollar continues to be the global reserve currency, but China's yuan is coming in for more and more use, but essentially in the public sector, not so much in the financial markets. So in a way, the US dollar supremacy is being challenged. But in this process, what happens is there is going to be a choice between the two. China is very strong in current account. It's able to produce surplus. It has invested in financial assets so far. But in the capital account, US is strong in the sense that, to give an illustration, in a way, USA is borrowing from China at 2%. But the private sector of USA, in terms of national balance sheet, is investing, and they are getting the returns of 13% or 15%. The depth, the capacity to withstand shocks in the global system, US has considerable strength. So you have this issue of one country which is very strong in current account, and another country which is very strong in the capital account, and they are competing for a situation of a place in the global currency. So, but basically, one of the things that people look for is the trust that that particular contract denominated in that currency can ultimately be executed through contractual arrangements, etc., etc. We know that. But what is the best test? Because the best test is, what are the central banks investing their reserves in? The best, because the people who know the international monetary system are supposed to be the central bankers. So the central bankers, where are they putting their money? Can you guess? What's the preference? No reserve currency, it's gold. That's the best signal that the central banks of the world have lost faith in all the reserve currencies. If you recall, before the global financial crisis, many of the central banks are selling gold. In fact, they had to put restrictions on the amount of gold that has to be sold so that the price of gold is not affected. After the crisis, many central banks, almost all central banks stopped selling gold. Many central banks started acquiring gold. Incidentally, RBI acquired last week, I think. The situation, therefore, is that we have no global currency which is command the respect of the central bankers themselves. Okay, this is as far as the money is concerned, and we'll stop there and say, yes, there is a bit of a challenge to the existing US dollar as global currency, and leave it there. Then what happens with regard to finance? See, money is multiplied by finance. Money is have I changed it? No, okay. Okay. Money is multiplied by finance. If the global currency is US dollar, global finance is controlled by Wall Street. Essentially, global finance is controlled by Wall Street. So, immediately after the Asian crisis, if you recall, immediately after the Asian crisis, Professor Jagdish Bhagwati had introduced this concept of he called it Wall Street Treasury Complex. And now together, that's a network. And that was further elaborated by Professor Wade of London School. And later, even after the recent crisis, Simon Johnson again traced the problem of the 2008 crisis to this same network that includes IMF and World Bank. So, after global financial crisis, when this was recognized, then people said we have to reform, we have to improve. So, people expected that it will improve. Maybe it is improving, I'll come to that later. But it is very clear that as far as global financial system is concerned, it is still a matter of concern. But more important from the global financial system as a whole, what has happened is, linked to the issue of reserves, China has its enormous wealth in the external balance sheet in their forex reserves. What has happened in the recent years? China has shifted. Instead of in financial assets, it is investing heavily in physical assets. And physical assets, what are the type of assets? Infrastructure, cross-country, therefore not very liquid, high risk, low return. That basically indicates some signal to me of a country and other countries perhaps bypassing the existing global financial system. And this bypass is in a way that if you have a situation where a country which is about to become first largest or second largest economy, if it itself is bypassing the global financial system, then that is the beginning of a big problem. Now there is another problem that it results in. IMF and World Bank are finding it difficult to assess the debt sustainability. If you want to assess the debt sustainability, you should have an aggregate picture of the debt, with a common denomination and understanding of the obligations. When there's a lot of investment that are going on, public sector to public sector, and a lot of debt that's being incurred in the process, so the debt sustainability analysis of the IMF and World Bank in regard to many countries is less than reliable. And therefore, there is another problem that is coming up in regard to the global systems. Now, where do we go from here is the next issue. I'm not able to see here. This is Thucydides' trap. Is that right? Right. An Athenian historian and general, Thucydides, in the 5th century BC wrote, "What made war inevitable was the growth of Athenian power and the fear this cast in Sparta." Will current US dominance on money finance exist in competition with China? Or is it that it will continue to be bipolar, slowly, what I may call the new bipolar world in money and finance? But there's a difference between an old bipolar and new bipolar. In old bipolar, Russia was one world, leading one world with its own currency, with its own trade arrangements, and here was USA. Now, and they're independent worlds almost, and India was the largest partner outside the communist bloc with Russia. If there's a possibility of a new bipolar world, you will have the two leaders of the bipolar world. They are highly integrated. Their economies are integrated. So you have a new bipolar world where the leaders of each pole are highly interdependent on each other. And that's not a happy state of affairs for the rest of the countries. So they have to strategically cooperate. So it's not as though you can play one against the other. So is it going to be a new bipolar world? If this is the way it goes, these are the type of issues I believe. And then what is it that, or is it possible that there will be a genuine multipolar system? Is it possible to have a multipolar system? Is it possible to have multinational currencies? The problem is when one national currency is doubling up as a global currency, if several of them double up as a global currency, it may mitigate, but it will not solve the problem. The disconnect will continue, except there may be some mitigation. So what do some friends think? And I have taken quotations from some of my best friends in the field. And first I'll read out because of the importance. One hopes that the war drums will be silenced through negotiation and mutual concessions. Then US and Chinese leaders can turn their attention to the broader problem of avoiding the Thucydides trap, thereby preventing a clash with consequences that would dwarf those of the trade war. Now, there is another possibility that since people are aware of the very serious consequences of this confrontation, there will be determination to avoid this confrontation, and that should be our hope. But there's somebody else, another friend of mine, Andrew Shang, who comes out with the possible technical solution, and he says, the rise of cryptocurrencies has created a unique opportunity for market forces to spearhead a shift toward a truly neutral reserve asset. With US leadership more unpredictable than ever, it is an opportunity that should not be missed. Is it maybe it's a good idea? But then ultimately, should there be a sovereign to back a currency? Our own experience with the Eurozone has shown that multiple sovereigns also are not good enough. There should be a single sovereign behind one currency, because ultimately the shocks have to be borne. So this is a question mark, but limited point I want to say is global monetary non-system, which is forever now, is being challenged, and global finance is being bypassed. This calls for multipolar, multidimensional initiatives, and I repeat, from all countries. Let me move on to the next. What are the accomplishments? And we have been doing a lot of things, having experienced global financial crisis. I think I can only sum up. It has been called mutual education and no accomplishments since the global crisis, but I'll explain to you later. First, let us take IMF. What is the international financial architecture? Broadly, it consists of IMF, World Bank, WTO, and more recently, G20 and Financial Stability Board. Coming to IMF, with which I was associated in several capacities, it will be interesting to, you had mentioned, Madam, about the role in Asian crisis. Its role in global financial crisis, the Independent Evaluation Organization has given its analysis of the IMF role. There is another independent evaluation organization about its role in Greece and Portugal, and I was associated both of them as advisor. The criticism of Stiglitz that we have flawed institutions and flawed ideologies, I think they'd confirm, but how much have we changed? See, imagine what happened to IMF a little before the global financial crisis. They didn't have money to pay salaries. This is the institution on which we are depending for running the monetary system or ensuring. But anyway, and so they had to ultimately plan, and Andrew Crockett Committee, they sold gold to invest the gold out of the reserves and pay the salaries. So I think there is something to be considered on an organization like that. But anyway, more important is, which we have not perhaps looked at, is G20. It is good, it's very good, and but the question is, G20 is a mechanism for consultation, discussion at the highest level. But the actual implementation has to be done either by IMF or by WTO or something else, and where the governance matters. So unless the G20 is concentrated on governance of institutions, but all the while we are told what policy should be adopted, who should adopt which policy. But how does it get effectuated? And secondly, its remit, which was originally confined to the issue of finance, has become diluted over a period. So I think there are a number of issues which G20 has to face, and if they are resolved, maybe there is hope, at least the political leadership. So the way I look at it is, and I have mentioned some other thing, how do you reconcile effectiveness and representativeness? Many people, many countries feel left out. Then the question is how much contextually you have to respond, because when it started only to contextual response to a crisis. So how much of structural and how much is focused? How much focus, how much should diffuse, because there are many people who believe G20 is trying to do everything. And as my friend Ed Truman, and I quote here, overall, the G20 summit at Cannes, and perhaps the same even now, resulted in some useful mutual education, but not much in terms of concrete accomplishments. But one thing which we are all missing is that much of the financial, as I mentioned earlier, global financial system, finance is global, the regulation is national, but more important, there are supporting systems. The supporting systems are credit rating agencies. 3 dominate the world credit rating agencies. 4 accounting firms. 2 or 3 news agencies. And most of them are dependent on Wall Street for majority part of the income. And I think we are presuming that global financial markets are competitive, and therefore we could regulate them on the assumption that there's competition. Now let me move on to what it all implies. All it implies is that we are going to have very difficult times, and it's not only in money finance. It's part of the bigger issue that's coming up. The ESCAP report, in fact, captures in many ways what I call the fundamental changes that are occurring in the global economy, which require deeper examination from a global perspective, but also in a regional context. I believe that these are, in a way, fundamental, but also in the nature of changing balances. Let me take first example. Many national governments have realized that people look to them when there is a problem. The crisis might have been global, the impact is national, and when the impact becomes national, the people look to the national governments. And the national governments are desperate for policy space to deliver the expectations of the people. So in some senses, they're fighting back for space. What should be that space is another matter. And this naturally involves a bit of realignment between the role of the state and the market. And more recent developments, including the crisis and subsequent developments that have taken place, are indicative of some sort of a role for state. In what manner, we don't know. But the fact is that there's a redefinition. And those where state was more active have been doing well in terms of growth, or even issue of equality. And also developing, as respected Prime Minister of Korea mentioned, the aid givers and aid takers, it's changing. In fact, more interesting, the surveys have shown that the youth of developing countries are a lot more confident about their future than the youth of advanced economies. There is also this issue of global versus regional, to which there was a brief mention. And more important, the finance and real. Earlier it was thought that the finance will promote development. Now there is a disconnect between finance and real. And finally, on accountability and stability also there are a number of issues. I would therefore conclude that all 3 are important: climate change and trade and finance and inequality. And in all these, Asia-Pacific region has an important role to play, and I should compliment ESCAP for doing that. And I'll conclude with a quote from the report in the foreword by Governor Shamsad Akhtar. Quote, "The state of multilateralism today stands at a critical juncture." And then she goes on to say, "Asia-Pacific has become a critical player in this system." Player, not just recipient, it's a player in this system. And then added, "Looking ahead, a more nuanced agenda for multilateralism will need to accommodate. I repeat, I think these are very wise statements, and we should build on that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy, for those very thoughtful and interesting perspectives. Excellent. Thank you. I would like to invite now our third speaker, His Excellency Mr. Zhang Jun, Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, to share some perspectives on the topic.
Chủ席女士、直秘女士，今天的这场讨论确实非常重要。在讨论伊始，直秘女士的介绍性的发言啊，已经充分地讲清楚了这次讨论的重要性。 那么确实，现在正如殖民女士所说，多边主义处在十字路口之上。那么当前呢，世界多极化和经济全球化全面深入的发展，全球治理体系和国际秩序的变革呢，加速的推进，多边主义面临的机遇在上升，但挑战也在同步的上升。那么一方面，我们面临着发展失衡、公平赤字、治理困境等突出问题，这就要求多边主义发挥更大的作用，也呼唤新兴市场和发展中国家在多边机制中发挥更大的作用。那么我们也高兴地看到，新兴市场和发展中国家以及新兴多边组织不断涌现，给多边主义呢注入了新的活力，带来了新的机遇。那么另一个方面呢，我们大家也都认同这样的看法：民粹主义、保护主义、单边主义和逆全球化的现象显著的上升，而且相互交织，严重冲击多边主义的权威性和有效性。那么多边主义何去何从，成为世界各国和各界高度关注的时代之问。那么多边主义是重要的，它为什么重要？我想至少从几个方面可以回答。第一呢，坚持多边主义是维护各方共同利益的需要。在全球化深入发展的今天，世界毫无疑问已经成为你中有我，我中有你的地球村，各国一荣俱荣，一损俱损，没有谁能独立应对人类面临的各种挑战，也没有哪个国家还能够退回到自我封闭的孤岛中去。坚持多边主义，遇到事情一起商量着办，采取集体行动应对挑战，才是维护各国共同利益的有效途径。那么第二呢，坚持多边主义是实现公平正义的需要。多边主义的基础呢，在于各方共同商定、共同遵守、共同受益的规则那么这些规则是公平的根本之所在。如果没有这些这些规则，公平就是一个较为虚幻的概念。那么没有这些规则就会导致丛林法则和零和游戏。那么显然我们也就没有真正的公平正义可言。所以规则不公才是最大的不公正。那么搞单边主义和双重标准，就等于是合则用，不合则弃。这显然本身就是违背多边规则的，不是个正确的选择。那么第三，坚持多边主义是应对重大挑战的需要。那当今世界面临贫困、不平等、环境恶化、气候变化等一系列重大的挑战，其根源在于全球发展的不平衡、不充分。我们要想在做大蛋糕的同时分好蛋糕，只能依靠多边的形式实现合作共赢，只能加强政策协调，形成发展合力，也只能携手合作，既防范负面溢出效应，也共同的应对好这些效应，从而应对重大挑战，维护我们的共同的福祉。那么面对国际形势的重大变化，能否牢牢坚持多边主义的正确方向，确实是世界面对的重大的考验。 它也关乎着世界的前途，也包括亚太的前途和命运。那么在这样一个形势之下，我们别无选择，一呢，还是要牢牢地把握全球治理的正确方向，以多边主义为基石的国际体系，为维护世界和平、促进人类发展发挥着不可替代的作用。我们要坚持共商共建共享理念，积极推动全球治理体系改革和建设，提升发展中国家在全球治理中的代表性和发言权。我们要努力地实现各国的权利平等、机会平等、规则平等。那么反之呢，搞单边主义、以邻为壑，则会导致发展停滞、贫困丛发，甚至战争。我们要以史为鉴，不能走回头路。我们要维护以联合国为核心的多边机制。那么回顾过去70年的历史，联合国为人类和平与发展事业做出了卓越的贡献。新的形势下，联合国的权威需要维护而不是破坏，联合国的作用应当加强而不是削弱。我们要恪守联合国宪章的宗旨和原则，维护联合国在全球治理中的重要地位，支持联合国呢在维护和平、促进发展方面继续发挥引领作用。那么就亚太地区而言，我们要继续支持 ESCAP 发挥在促进亚太的发展进程当中发挥重要的作用。我们不希望看到在亚太经社会的大厅里有那么多空的座位。我们要坚持以规则为基础的多边贸易体制。单边主义、贸易保护主义是开历史的倒车，不但解决不了经济发展中的问题，反而会让世界经济重蹈衰退的覆辙。我们要维护以世贸组织为核心的基于规则、开放、透明、包容、非歧视的多边贸易体制，继续推进贸易和投资自由化、便利化，反对贸易保护主义。那么我们也要大力地推动联动发展，实现共同的繁荣。我们刚才已经说到，在全球化时代没有哪个国家可以独善其身，协调联动是必然的选择，这也是多边主义的应有之义。我们要加强发展战略对接，促进政策规则交流互鉴、协调联动，减少负面的外溢效应。我们要加强亚太互联互通网络，朝着贸易投资大市场、货币金融大流通、基础设施大联通的目标迈进，为落实2030年可持续发展议程奠定更加坚实的基础。中国呢，倡导联动发展，就是希望通过基础设施和政策的联通，让各国呢都能在全球价值链中能够处于更加有利的地位，谋求更好的发展机会。那么我们要倡导伙伴关系，共建命运共同体。亚太各国虽然国情和发展阶段不尽相同，但实现经济增长的愿望是相同的，应该成为同舟共济、休戚与共的好伙伴。这是我们共同维护多边主义的精神纽带。我们要平等相待，互商互谅，走出一条对话而不对抗、结伴而不结盟的国与国交往新路。我们要秉持和而不同的理念，促进优势互补、合作互惠、发展互鉴，打造互信、包容、合作、共享的亚太伙伴关系，共同打造共同的命运。这些理念呢， 听起来可能有一些虚幻，但是只要我们坚持不懈地向前推进，它就能够成为我们共同的现实。那么中国呢，始终是多边主义的支持者、维护者、贡献者。长期以来呀，特别是改革开放以来，中国坚定地维护以联合国为核心的全球治理体系，遵守国际法和国际规则，履行应尽的责任，为维护世界和平做出了贡献。随着中国的经济发展，中国的经济行为呢越来越多，中国的投资走向世界。但我想严肃地指出，中国在世界上的投资是按照各国通行的法律规则来进行的，是坚持以规则为基础，以市场为导向的，最终呢，也是既为中国的发展做出了贡献，也为其他国家创造了就业，创造了机会。我们是国际规则的模范的遵守者。那么中国呢，也是在国内践行新的发展理念，在国际上倡导公平、开放、全面、创新的新型发展观。这个在2015年的联合国发展峰会上，习近平主席鲜明地指出了这个发展观的这几个要素。我们大力推动构建开放型世界经济。我们的想法很简单，也可能很单纯，就是我们在实现自身发展的同时，能够为世界、为其他国家创造机遇，做出贡献。那么中国呀，还坚定地推动构建新型国际关系，构建人类命运共同体。我们的目的呢，就是与各国共享发展机遇，谋求合作共赢，实现最终的发展。那么中国积极推进“一带一路”建设，目的也是打造一个多边合作的平台，通过这样一个公共产品，让各国既分享中国的发展机遇，也共同参与到这项多边合作的进程中来，从而推动各国的发展。那么中国还坚定地推进南南合作，我们通过中国与联合国和平与发展基金、中国南南合作基金等这个平台，努力地履行我们作为一个发展中大国的责任。我们的想法就是呢，这个发展中国家都是我们的穷兄弟，是吧？中国发展了，我们不会忘了其他国家，在通向发展的道路上，正如昨天联合国大会主席所言，我们一个都不能少。那么中方相信，只要我们携起手来，坚持开放共赢，勇于变革创新，向着构建人类命运共同体的目标不断的迈进，我们就一定能够为多边主义注入新活力，增添源源不断的前进动力，共创亚太和世界的美好未来。我谢谢主席女士，谢谢知密女士，谢谢大家。
Thank you, Mr. Tseng. May I now invite to the podium Dr. Ishrat Hussain, Professor Emeritus of the Institute of Business Administration and former Governor of the Central Bank of Pakistan.
Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, Executive Secretary, ESCAP, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. First of all, let me thank the Executive Secretary and ESCAP for providing me this opportunity to share my thoughts on a subject which is becoming quite relevant to the development dialogue in the world, and particularly in Asia and Pacific. I would like to take a different tack because my predecessors on the panel have dealt on a number of issues which I don't want to repeat. So I would start with the primary responsibility for inequality lies with the states and the national governments. And then say how the international economic cooperation and multilateralism is helping or hindering these efforts. Are they supplementing them, or they are becoming an obstacle in the way of the national governments? Let me begin with a survey of literature, which is quite unsettled at this moment. And the lessons which we have learned so far about inequality are still very tentative in nature and very much work ongoing. And there's a lot of interesting debate and discourse on this whole subject. Unlike poverty, where a lot of theoretical, cross-country, and country-specific empirical evidence shows that by and large, rapid economic growth does result in poverty reduction, the literature and evidence about the relationship between growth and income inequality has remained inconclusive. We can find countries such as Brazil, which started with high Gini coefficients, and as a student of economic development when I was at graduate school, a classic paper by Albert Fischlow showed this to be the epitome of high inequality. But under Cardoso and Lula regimes, Brazil has made a lot of efforts in order to bring down that particular high level of inequality. But we also find, surprisingly, that some of the egalitarian societies, such as China and India, which have now been growing at a very fast pace, and China particularly has been successful in lifting 700 million people out of poverty, that the inequalities have actually widened in these countries. China and India both are now getting recognition by Forbes as to which country has the most billionaires in the emerging markets. And the aggregate wealth of these billionaires equals about 20% of the poor people's or the lower deciles' aggregate income. So that is a cause for concern because, yes, these are growing economies, they are reducing poverty, but the income, regional, gender inequalities are widening. And therefore, I'm also very surprised that this most dynamic region on the world, the Asia and Pacific, has seen the largest increase in the average Gini coefficient in the last 25 years. In South Asia, we have an additional problem, which is the stark gender disparities as far as labor force participation is concerned, the status of women is concerned, the incomes and access to public services. So in addition to the interpersonal income disparities, we have regional disparities, where a state like Bihar is almost 1/6 or 1/7 of the Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, which are the highest per capita incomes. And that, I think, is something we have to worry about, gender and the regional disparities. In my personal and humble view, the agenda for the SDGs should have taken inequality as an overarching theme for 2030 period, like the MDGs have very successfully taken up poverty reduction as the central theme, and all the efforts of the international and national governments were focused on how the other goals could be harnessed in order to attack the question of poverty. And you have seen the results, which are quite impressive. Therefore, the SDG framework should have been woven around those particular goals which make the highest contribution towards the reduction of poverty. And therefore, the national governments and the international agencies, both the non-profit as well as the multilateral agencies, would therefore be having a very focused attention on some of those accelerated contributors to poverty reduction. Right now, with the 17 goals, you have a wish list which is acceptable to everyone. It is a consensus document, but as an economist, it doesn't appeal to me that there are no trade-offs and there are no tensions in a world where resources are limited. But having said that, I still maintain that it is up to the individual countries, because SDGs provides that flexibility in the implementation of these goals, that some of the countries where inequality is really rising, they should pay attention to this as their very particular objective. I also realize that initial conditions, countries' resource endowments, and policy and institutional arrangements are variable, and they would affect the choices of instruments and type of interventions. But we can still draw some broad lessons from the experience of those countries which have had successful transition in providing equality of opportunity. And the word I use carefully is the equality of opportunity. And that is what is the key success factor, in my view, for combating this particular menace and improving the living standards of the citizens. Let me say that those countries who have linked their production structure with the social welfare system have had witnessed better outcomes. So this debate between market versus state, I think, is a totally flawed and irrelevant. Both are needed. A strong market and an effective government. So production, distribution, and exchange remains driven by market forces and competition to produce the most efficient allocation of resources. But as markets only favor those who possess assets, land, capital, and skills, and in these days, the sportsmen and women are the highest talent going around the world, where Muhammad Saleh can be bought and sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. So that is something we have to think about, the uneven distribution of skills, which are becoming a more important factor of determining the income outcomes. And it leaves behind those who have no assets and who are poor and less well endowed. And one of the contributing factors, in my view, reading the Brazil story, was the increased expenditures on social sectors, as well as conditional cash transfers to those who were living below the poverty. So what is the recipe? There's no fixed recipe, but you can take some ingredients off the shelf, and in my view, it is progressive taxation, averting evasion of taxes, limiting tax concessions and tax incentives to the rich, and providing public goods with emphasis on social sectors, social transfers, and environmental sustainability. If this is the strategy, I think the chances of overcoming inequality as well as reducing poverty appear much better than any other set of policies. Although, as I said, these will vary according to the countries. My other problem, which I look at the literature, is that the educational achievements of the children today are very much determined by those of their parents. Educational segregation now serves as a mechanism for social isolation and differentiation in network of relationships. This reinforces class endogamy in higher income sector, which in turn preserves and reproduces a system of inheritance and privileges. If you have been to the best business schools in India, you have your network, and the chances are that if you graduate from those schools, you will get a very fine job. But if you come from the second tier or third tier business schools or technology institutes, you have no network of relationships, and you may not even get a job. And this intergenerational mobility, which has always contributed to the income inequality, is fast disappearing. And this is something which the state has to provide: stipends, scholarships, interest-free loans, voucher schemes, because these have done tricks in many other cases. So as entrepreneurial energies are unleashed by competitive market forces and higher per capita incomes are generated, that raises the revenue base of the state, which can be used for redistributive purposes, for social spending, as well as the social protection. Now, having said that this is the primary responsibility of the national governments and the states, let me take a survey of what is the current stance of the multilateralism and international economic cooperation. During 1990 to 2008, world growth in trade was twice as fast as the world output growth. And therefore, the developing countries were able to take advantage of this trade regime in order to improve their incomes and living standards and find employment for their youth. Since 2008, the world trade is now lagging behind the historical rate. Trade liberalization, which fueled the engine of growth of developing countries in the 2 decades since 1990, has slowed down. Doha round of development has stalled, and the role of WTO is being increasingly questioned, even for dispute resolution mechanisms. The bilateral trade war between China and the United States, the revisiting of NAFTA, the removal of the Trans-Pacific partnerships are not some of the very healthy traditions in the former growth trade nexus, and this is going to affect. So protectionism, make in your country sentiments are now becoming more attractive to the electorate, and this is something we have to worry about, because these are the champions of trade liberalization who have actually persuaded the developing countries to open up their markets, and now they are closing their markets, which is something which is counterintuitive. Now, I don't want to repeat what my learned friend Governor Reddy has talked about, the capital and the finance and the money. I would like to submit only that the financial flows to developing countries have become more and more volatile and unreliable, and a source of sudden shocks of instability. They were a source of investment in real economy and real sectors, but no longer. And tapering tantrum, you are all aware of, reminds us of the loss of the control of monetary authorities in developing countries on key variables such as exchange rate and the interest rate. Now, quantitative easing has done its job in stabilizing and providing a very smooth monetary regime for the advanced countries. But as you move away from the quantitative easing and go towards a monetary policy which is more normal, which the impact of this would be felt by a substantial capital outflows from the developing countries in the pursuit of flight for safety as well as the higher returns, which is started. And Argentina is an latest example where the capital outflows and the exchange rate is now under stress. The most important factor, in my view, for reducing inequality in incomes was the migrants who were working in the US, in Europe, and the Middle East, and who were sending the money back to their families who were poor and who couldn't find jobs when they were there. So this was a very major source of poverty reduction and income equality reduction. But look at the recent development in these countries. You have Brexit, you have all the rightist parties which are anti-immigrant, and not only anti-immigrant, they are not willing to absorb the refugees from the distressed countries in dire need of humanitarian aid from Syria. And look at the United States, which is the greatest beneficiary of migration, both at the lower end, where all the menial jobs were done by the Mexicans and the Central Americans, and the high end, where the Chinese and Indians and all other bright and talented people from all over the world would migrate to the United States to contribute to technological advances. And that is now under threat, that even the families of the migrants who have lived for decades in the United States are being asked to leave overnight. And that, I think, is something we have to worry about. Finally, on the technologies. Yes, technologies are always a source of economic prosperity and growth, no doubt about it. But the transition in which the disruptions take place have to be managed very carefully. In this world where you have disruptive technologies, the world of work will be restructured. And the world of work will be restructured, which is pushing more jobs in the informal sector than in the formal sector. And that is not good for income inequality. And therefore, the policies which will help the occupational restructuring, the retraining, will reduce the joblessness, because most of these studies are predicting growth with joblessness. And we do not want to allow disruptive technologies to create a social explosion in the countries because of the high unemployment, but use the disruptive technologies in order to enhance productivity, but retrain those who are the losers from the technology, in order to bring about a positive living standard for everyone and not for just those who are skilled. And the agenda on climate change is too long, and my time is quite limited. So that is another area where the income inequality will have a very major role because of the food insecurity, because of the energy insecurity, because of the low-lying islands disappearing from the scene, the migration taking place, which I call as the climate refugees. And if there are no countries willing to absorb these climate refugees, where would they go? And therefore, this is something we have to think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein. May I now invite to the podium Ms. Christelle Pratt, Deputy Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. Ms. Pratt.
Madam Chair, Your Excellency President Dr. Hilda Heine, Executive Secretary Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, Excellencies, my distinguished fellow panelists and distinguished delegations. The Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat is grateful for the opportunity to share Pacific-specific views on this important subject. We in the Pacific value global and regional multilateralism because we understand the power of collective voice and collective action. 60 years ago, Samoa and Fiji started the Pacific's engagement with the United Nations. A decade later, the Pacific Island countries established what is now known as the Pacific Islands Forum, because our leaders knew then, as now, that we can achieve more together than alone. Today, our 14 Forum Island countries of an 18-member-strong organisation are still developing, but external factors such as the global crisis of 2008, climate change, and more frequent and intense disasters exacerbate our inherent development challenges of remoteness, vulnerability, and resource and capacity constraints. We are also subject to new levels of geopolitical interest, and we remain vulnerable. The multilateralism agenda is founded on the premise that regardless of size, we all deserve an equal voice in global decision-making. It has empowered our small nations to collectively punch above our weight and influence global policy, such as our contribution to the 2030 Agenda and the establishment of a standalone goal on oceans, and our efforts on climate action that help to seal the deal for the Paris Agreement. The SIDS groupings call for tangible and actionable outcomes for the Samoa pathway, and it helped to generate hundreds of partnerships for small island developing states during the Samoa-hosted UN SIDS conference in 2014, and the hundreds of voluntary commitments for oceans at the UN Oceans Conference in 2017, co-chaired by Fiji. But partnerships need to be accountable, genuine and durable. A considerable number of partnerships promised have not delivered tangible results at country level. In the Pacific, the framework for Pacific regionalism and the Blue Pacific narrative reflects a renewed political commitment to regional multilateralism, to harness our shared ocean identity, geography and resources, to drive our development, recognising the geostrategic, economic, cultural and ecological value of our region, the world's largest ocean continent, for ourselves and for the world. To do this, we are taking collective actions for ourselves. The Pacific Roadmap for Sustainable Development guides Pacific efforts to streamline and integrate regional implementation and accountability for the 2030 Agenda, Samoa Pathway, and our Framework for Pacific Regionalism. The Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific is a global first that combines collective action on climate change and disaster risk, demonstrating the Pacific's ability to pioneer and forge coordinated multi-stakeholder actions. The proposed Pacific Resilience Facility is a regional mechanism to finance our resilience efforts, focusing resilience finance in a way that is relevant to our scale, our capacity, and our context, that is proactive in seeking to risk-proof new initiatives and retrofit existing assets before extreme events impact us. At the Asia-Pacific level, we welcome ESCAP's and other UN agencies and financing institutions' support to our member countries. But if we are to deliver on the promise of leaving no one behind and for inclusive governance and policy making in our region, we must ensure the P in the AP is much more than a small and oftentimes a silent P. We must make better links between the Asia-Pacific 2030 Agenda Roadmap and the Pacific Roadmap for Sustainable Development. The Pacific needs to be better consulted when global Asia-Pacific reports that represent our Pacific stories are developed and published. We also call on ESCAP to ensure that the accountability that is provided to ASEAN is also offered to the Pacific Islands Forum of how, and importantly what, ESCAP programs and delivers within the Pacific. We call for more support to the Pacific on South-South cooperation, as our Pacific experience demonstrates that it is the most relevant capacity-building modality that works. The Pacific can learn from Asia on capitalising on the potential of science and technology to address our connectivity challenges and deliver more carbon-neutral development. Finally, the universality of the 2030 Agenda is one of the biggest triumphs of multilateralism. But such an ambitious undertaking requires sustainable and coherent financing. We call on the UN system and global financing institutions to ensure coherence between the financing deliverables from the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Paris Agreement to drive sustainable development and enable our member states to achieve their development aspirations that are underpinned by resilience, sustainability, equity, peace, and prosperity. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt, for your insightful remarks. We now invite next to the podium Mr. Vladimir Potapenko, Deputy Secretary General of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. How do you say it? Sorry.
Спасибо, госпожа председатель, уважаемый исполнительный секретарь, дамы и господа. Весьма благодарны за то, что уже второй раз за этот день мне предоставляется трибуна для того, чтобы поведать вам о Шанхайской организации сотрудничества. Я также благодарен представителю Китайской Народной Республики, заместителю министра иностранных дел, за то, что он, хотя мы об этом заранее практически договорились, практически не сказал ни слова о Шанхайской организации сотрудничества, хотя имел на это полное право, являясь председательствующей страны в этом году, и который сделал большой вклад на то, чтобы организация стала более сильной, более развитой во благо стабильности, безопасности, процветания народов и развития. Построение торгово-экономических отношений в рамках многосторонних соглашений, а также их реализация, являются одними из основных приоритетов деятельности ШОС на экономическом треке. Принцип мультилатерализма прописан в Хартии ШОС, основном документе организации, который был принят 17 лет назад. Выстроенная на основе этого документа модель многостороннего партнерства продолжает подтверждать эффективность и востребовательность. При этом важно еще то, что в рамках ШОС главным показателем является равнозначимость мнений всех вместе и каждого в отдельности, независимо от политических и экономических весовых категорий участников. Исключительное равноправие всех участников, вне зависимости от потенциала и возможностей, подчеркивает консенсусный принцип принятия решений в ШОС. Таким образом, ШОСовская модель – это не выстраивание в одну шеренгу, а взаимопонимание, не доминирование и навязывание, а равенство и координация. Чем теснее координация, тем глубже взаимопонимание. Чем строже соблюдается равенство, тем крепче и эффективнее становится партнерство в рамках ШОС. А стабильная обстановка в регионе позволяет сегодня более фокусироваться на общерегиональных проектах развития. Преимущество ШОС заключается в том, что она позволяет исключительно через равноправный диалог искать и находить оптимальные развязки даже самых сложных вопросов. Именно возможность совместного поиска составного, общеприемлемого, положительного решения, который представляет из себя суммарный результат максимально возможного совмещения суверенных прав, собственных интересов и общих задач, является сильной стороной ШОС. Если такое совмещение не складывается быстро, то это не означает стоп-сигнал, прекращение дальнейших усилий во взятом направлении для финального нахождения общего знаменателя. Эффективность ШОСовской модели следует рассматривать с точки зрения не процесса, а конечного результата. Она служит стимулом для постепенного сотворчества, ибо обладает значительным потенциалом гибкости. Азиатско-Тихоокеанский регион – неотъемлемая часть общего дома государств-членов ШОС. Как справедливо отмечают в течение 2 дней участники этой сессии СКАТа, АТР демонстрирует уверенный экономический подъем, стремление к совместному устойчивому и инклюзивному развитию. Мы являемся свидетелями того, как на пространстве АТР активно разворачивается процесс запуска ряда масштабных экономических инициатив и проектов, в том числе такие проекты отдельных государств-членов ШОС, как «Один поезд, один путь» и «Большое евразийское партнерство». Вместе с тем мы не должны забывать, что острые проблемы неравенства, нищеты и безработицы продолжают оставаться общей заботой. Одним из ключевых механизмов рассмотрения вопросов многостороннего экономического взаимодействия является Совет глав правительств государств-членов ШОС. В декабре 2017 года состоялось очередное заседание этого органа, в ходе которого были отмечена важность продолжения широкого равноправного международного сотрудничества в целях придания импульса оздоровлению мировой экономики, обеспечению экономической и финансовой стабильности, поддержки устойчивого, динамичного, сбалансированного и инклюзивного роста. СГП ШОС подтвердил готовность организации к реализации многосторонних инициатив государств-членов ШОС, способствующих взаимовыгодному партнерскому сотрудничеству в регионе, ускорению экономического роста, расширению транспортных связей, увеличению объемов инвестиций, внедрению инноваций и обеспечению занятости населения. Совместными усилиями государств-членов ШОС реализуются проекты инфраструктуры, строятся автомобильные и железные дороги, мосты и транспортные переходы. За 15 лет в разы увеличилось количество регулярных авиарейсов между государственными членами ШОС. К примеру, только в Китае более чем в 4 раза возрос еженедельный авиапоток из Кыргызстана, России и Узбекистана, из Таджикистана в 8 раз, а из Казахстана в 12. Растут взаимные накопленные инвестиции государств-членов ШОС, которые к 2016 году превысили $40 миллиардов США. Еще одной площадкой, являющейся примером применения принципа мультилатерализма в ШОС, принято считать деловой совет ШОС. Он умело сочетает в себе работу бизнес-структур государств семьи ШОС с деятельностью государственных и частных компаний по созданию инновационных фондов, продвигает проекты среднего и малого бизнеса, высоких технологий и электронной торговли. Активно действует и межбанковское объединение ШОС, которое реализует целый ряд инвестиционных проектов, значимых для экономик наших стран. В их числе финансирование и реализация крупных инвестиционных проектов в России и Казахстане, а также проектов развития малого и среднего бизнеса в Кыргызстане, Таджикистане и Узбекистане. Сформировалось условия для дальнейшего решения географии участников МБО. Так, на рассмотрении находятся заявки от Азербайджана и Армении. Считаем важным отметить, что в рамках ШОС наибольший прогресс с использованием принципа мультилатерализма достигнут в транспортной сфере. В этом направлении мы много лет плотно взаимодействуем с ESCAP и имеем значимые совместные результаты. Важнейшим достижением сотрудничества, как я уже отмечал с утра, является вступившее в силу в 2017 году соглашение государств-членов ШОС по созданию благоприятных условий для международных автомобильных перевозок. Оно создает правовую базу паритетных условий для автоперевозчиков и единообразную основу для их профессиональной деятельности на пространстве ШОС. 23 ноября 2017 года совместно с ESCAP в Бангкоке мы провели специальное мероприятие высокого уровня, посвященное вопросам региональной транспортной взаимосвязанности, которое продемонстрировало очередной интерес региона КТР к дальнейшему наращиванию транспортного сотрудничества. Международные признания получили гуманитарные проекты с секретариата ШОС. Международный форум ШОС, культурно-образовательное мероприятие под названием ШОС «Наш общий дом» способствует укреплению шанхайского духа, сближает и взаимному познанию народов семьи ШОС, поддержание позитивного имиджа организации. С принятием Индии и Пакистана в ШОС в качестве полноправных членов ШОС в июне прошлого года ШОС превратилась в трансконтинентальную организацию с ареалом ответственности от Северного Ледовитого океана до Индийского океана, от китайского Лянгугана до российского Калининграда. 8 государств-членов ШОС объединяет более 40% населения Земли. Совокупный валовой внутренний продукт государств-членов ШОС по паритету покупательной способности составляет около 33 триллионов долларов США, почти 1/4 от мирового показателя. К ответственности ШОС ранее относилась практически только Центральная Азия. Сегодня прибавилась Южная Азия. Организация активно укрепляет и развивает свои связи также с АСЕАН, то есть в зону ответственности у нас появляется уже Юго-Восточная Азия. Предстоящий в июне текущего года саммит ШОС в городе Циндао 9-10 июня, как ожидается, впервые определит новый фактор ее развития в рамках Шанхайской восьмерки. Ключевым общим ориентиром саммита, безусловно, будет оставаться совместное поступательное развитие на основе принципа мультилатерализма. Хотел бы отметить, что и саммит ШОС, который состоится в Циндао, пройдет в новом формате, в формате восьмерки. Но это не старая восьмерка, о которой вы знаете, которая называлась G8. Это новый G8. И к саммиту в Циндао, который, безусловно, внесет свой особый вклад в поддержание мира и стабильность в развитии мира, в обеспечении устойчивого развития, укрепления гуманитарного сотрудничества на обширном пространстве организации. В заключение хотел бы еще раз поблагодарить лично исполнительного секретаря ESCAP, доктора Шамшат Ахтар, за ее личный вклад в расширение и углубление эффективного сотрудничества между нашими организациями ради продвижения инклюзивного и экономического и социального развития региона. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you, Mr. Potapenko, for your perspectives. May I now invite to the podium Ambassador Karsten Warnecke, Executive Director of the Asia Euro Foundation.
Thank you, Chair, Executive Secretary, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Asia-Europe Foundation, I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I'm very honored to have been asked to address you. Allow me to begin with a brief introduction of the Asia-Europe Foundation, ASEF. ASEF promotes understandings, strengthens relationships, and facilitates cooperation among the people, institutions, and organizations of Asia and Europe, and has 53 members. ASEF enhances dialogue, enables exchanges, and encourages collaboration across the thematic areas of culture, education, governance, including human rights, sustainable development, economy, and public health. ASEF is an intergovernmental, not-for-profit organization located in Singapore. Founded in 1997, it is the only institution of the Multilateral Bi-Regional Asia-Europe meeting, the ASEM process. ASEF runs more than 25 projects a year all over Asia and Europe, consisting of around 100 activities, mainly conferences, seminars, workshops, lectures, publications, and online platforms, together with about 125 partner organizations. Each year, over 3,000 Asians and Europeans participate in ASEF's activities, and much wider audiences are reached through its various events, networks, and web portals. Now, how does ASEF relate to today's topic? ASEF has been committed to supporting the global pursuit of sustainable development. In 2003, the Asia-Europe Environment Forum was established with the aim of fostering interregional cooperation between Asia and Europe on sustainable development and its environmental dimensions. The Environmental Forum has actively brought together stakeholders from Asia and Europe through facilitated dialogue and knowledge exchange to explore different points of view and new perspectives regarding serious environmental challenges. Since 2013, the Environment Forum focused its activities on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development with a strong belief that SDGs offer a common language that promotes dialogue among countries. Acting as both facilitator and bottom-up promoter of wide-ranging initiatives, the Environment Forum provides the platform for knowledge sharing on sustainable development and capacity building for policymakers and partner organizations. The Environment Forum recognizes that Sustainable Development Goal number 17 plays an integral role in fulfilling the central pledge contained in Agenda 2030 to ensure that no one will be left behind, and to see all goals and targets met for all nations, all peoples, and for all parts of society. To this end, the Environment Forum has been directly working on the promotion of the following targets. Number 17.9, quote, enhance international support for implementing effective and targeted capacity building in developing countries to support national plans to implement all the SDGs, unquote. 1714, quote, enhance policy coherence for sustainable development, unquote. 1716, quote, enhance the global partnership for sustainable development complemented by multi-stakeholder partnerships that mobilize and share knowledge, expertise, technology, and financial resources to support the achievement of the SDGs in all countries, in particular developing countries, unquote. And 1717, quote, encourage and promote effective public, public-private, and civil society partnerships, building on the experience and resourcing strategies of partnerships, unquote. Narrowing the scope of the Environment Forum's work to ASEAN countries, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the Environment Forum has been organizing capacity building activities to support policy makers in Cambodia, the Lao PDR, Myanmar, and Vietnam, the so-called CLMV region, since 2014. Despite the technological gap faced, the CLMV countries can choose their path to grow sustainably. To this end, the Environment Forum focuses on two types of activities in the CLMV region. First, national workshops where we work closely with government officials from one of the CLMV countries and address the issues related to Agenda 2030 faced by this country. And second, regional conferences where we gather delegates from each CLMV country to share experiences of national implementation successes and challenges and provide a platform for collaborative learning. The objectives of the Environment Forum's activities in the CLMV region are to provide insights into practical matters in implementing SDGs, to map existing national policies in alignment with SDGs, to assess how SDGs can be tailored and integrated, to set national targets based on priorities, capacities, and resources, and finally, to prepare implementation and monitoring frameworks. Ultimately, aligning with the pledge, "No one will be left behind," the aim of these activities is to ensure that the low and lower middle income economies in this diverse region are included and actively participating in the Agenda 2030 dialogue and initiatives. The Environment Forum has recently concluded its 4th CLMV regional conference, which took place on the 26th and 27th March 2018 here in Bangkok. The conference focused on SDGs financing and on SDG 12 on sustainable consumption and production. On SDGs financing, for instance, the conference found that countries like Vietnam have seen tax income as percentage of GDP stagnate, thus questioning the sustainability of public domestic sources of financing. Therefore, increasingly, countries should also tap into private sources, more specifically businesses, for SDGs financing. However, there's little awareness of businesses' place in SDGs implementation, and Mr. Hossein had pointed out earlier how important it is that the market and the state work together. So this is a fundamental issue as businesses function according to the logic of the marketplace. Non-business actors, particularly governments, have a role to play in translating and formulating the SDGs into demands that are actionable in the business world. This is particularly necessary as the SDGs do not have a dedicated international funding mechanism such as the Green Climate Fund, giving SDGs financing a less clear profile. The 4th CLMV Regional Conference also found that CLMV countries are struggling with the lack of clear metadata at the global level on SDG 12 indicators, which hampers the progress on the national level. This calls for more coordination between countries, especially within the region, which face similar challenges so that best practices can be diffused more effectively. The success of SDG 12 is important as it has a significant impact on the attainment of other SDGs due to the high level of interlinkages. I would like to reiterate the importance of SDG 17, which covers in detail the requirements in terms of indicators that are necessary for the implementation and success of all SDGs, which includes finance and technology that would address the aforementioned issues. The ambitious global goals set forth by Agenda 2030 tackle transboundary and highly complex issues and challenges. Therefore, as countries are committed in pursuing the SDGs, it is imperative to accept that Agenda 2030 cannot be achieved with countries working independently. It requires the partnership of governments, the private sector, civil society, and the public. Thus, we laud ESCAP's work in promoting regional cooperation and collective action in pursuit of the 2030 Agenda, and at the same time, leaving no one behind. I conclude by wishing you all a successful outcome of the 74th session of ESCAP. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador. We now have the last speaker in this segment. May I invite to the podium Mr. Paul Plustein, Senior Fellow, Center for International Governance Innovation.
So thank you very much. It's pretty daunting to follow I'm a journalist by trade, and following such a distinguished group coming before me, people who I've literally asked what I ought to think, particularly Dr. Ishrat Hussain, someone I literally interviewed when I was a reporter at the Washington Post. So let me begin by talking about a book I wrote. It was published 9 years ago. It was titled Misadventures of the Most Favored Nations. It was about the problems afflicting the global trading system, specifically the WTO. This is not a book promotion, I promise. I'm going to use the title of the book to make some points. If you want to buy the book, it's okay, I won't object, but that's not the point of my remarks today. The book was, I'll admit, a bit starry-eyed about the WTO. I'm going to be a bit starry-eyed about the WTO in what I'm going to say today. The WTO has a lot of flaws. In fact, the book dwelled at length about what a dysfunctional institution it can be, and how impossible it has become for member countries to reach the consensus that's necessary for progress. But this is at the risk of belaboring the obvious. The WTO is still the best institution we have to prevent a reversion to the mutually destructive conflict the world underwent in the 1930s. It's because countries take their trade disputes to independent WTO tribunals. They refrain from tit-for-tat retaliation that can lead to trade wars, and they abide by their commitments to keep limits on their trade barriers. And perhaps most important, they're bound by the MFN principle, which provides a bulwark against the formation of hostile trade blocs. Now, the book basically argued that the WTO is in a lot of trouble because of the failure. Remember, this is 9 years ago. Because of the failure of the Doha round and the threat of protectionism arising from the global financial crisis, combined with other longer-standing problems, particularly the proliferation of free trade agreements at the regional and bilateral level. I believe that these detract from the WTO's centrality in the trading system. And I argue that the WTO is in danger, not of collapsing, but of atrophying and gradually seeing its credibility and its authority erode, perhaps to the point where its most valuable feature, the dispute settlement system, would lose its authority. Well, what's happened since then, since Misadventures of the Most Favored Nations was published? Well, since then, the WTO has certainly, first of all, it's proven its worth by helping to keep protectionism in check after the global crisis. But other developments in years since have been very troubling. And the idea that the most favored nations are having some misadventures may be quite an understatement. How countries of the Asia-Pacific respond to the current situation could well determine whether we have further misadventures or whether those misadventures are avoided. It won't surprise you to hear that the developments I find most worrisome involve, I guess, what you could call the two most favored nations of all, China and the country of which I'm a citizen, the United States. In China, we've had a profound intensification of a trend toward, call it what you like, state capitalism, techno-nationalism, which presents the WTO with some very serious challenges. Let me emphasize, I recognize that when China joined the WTO in 2001, it undertook some tremendous obligations. And by and large, China has delivered. It's fulfilled its promises by lowering trade barriers and adopting a staggering array of reforms. I'm not a believer in the view that China cheats. Its record of complying with decisions in WTO disputes is quite commendable. But the non-transparent ways in which the party state in China influences outcomes in the Chinese market to benefit domestic firms, at the very least violates the spirit of some fundamental WTO principles, even if it doesn't violate the letter of WTO rules. Now, it's one thing if a relatively small economy adopts these sorts of policies. That doesn't present an existential challenge to the WTO. It's quite another thing when the country in question is as big an export juggernaut and has as big a market as China has. Having said all that about China, an even bigger problem is that posed, again, by my country, the United States. Even before the election of Donald Trump, the U.S. was taking action to get rid of individual members of the WTO's appellate body because it didn't like the way some of the decisions were going. Now, under the Trump administration, it's undermining the appellate body's authority even more by holding up the appointment of new members. Much worse than that is the imposition of tariffs in the steel and aluminum sectors, very flimsy pretext of national security. That flouts, if not the rules of the WTO, certainly the widely shared norms of the WTO. The multilateral tariffs that China has been threatened with mean that the United States is trying to set itself up as prosecutor, judge, and jury. This is a really flagrant disregard for the spirit of the system's basic principles. So we're at risk of losing all those good things that I mentioned before about the WTO, all those virtues. The world could well revert to a historical norm, and make no mistake, it is the historical norm in which the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Now that will mean inequality, the word that we've heard about so much in this conference, will increase. The big problem that this conference is addressing will be exacerbated. If we end up with multiple economic blocs where countries engage with each other in the trading system based on power, not on rules, it's going to be suboptimal for all countries, but it's going to be especially bad for small and weak states. Okay, so enough of my hand-wringing, which I think probably most of you agree with. So what can be done? Well, to policymakers in this hall, I'd make a couple of overarching points. And these may seem blindingly obvious, but I'd like to elaborate on them in ways that I think may depart a bit from sort of the orthodoxy. Two overarching points: shore up the WTO and don't undermine it further. As I say, these are blindingly obvious. I was very glad to hear the Executive Secretary emphasize those points earlier. What's important now is preserving the multilateral system. And when I say multilateral, I mean it at the global level. I don't mean it at the regional level. Strengthening rules at the global level that keep the world safe from rampant protectionism, rather than constantly seeking to eliminate more impediments to the movement of goods and services across borders. So I would urge policymakers in the Asia Pacific, and here's perhaps where I am diverging from the opinions that are almost ritually expressed in forums such as this. Just because negotiations are stalled in the WTO, I would argue you shouldn't succumb to the temptation to forge regional and bilateral free trade agreements in Asia. We saw just a few days ago at the China, South Korea, Japan summit, those three countries edging closer together to the three-way deal that they've been talking about for years. Now, it's very desirable, of course, for China and Japan and South Korea to resolve all their diplomatic differences, but I would argue that this is exactly the wrong way to go. Free trade agreements, I don't dispute, they're well-intended and they have benefits. Yes, economies, of course, stand to gain when foreign markets become more receptive to their exports and prices fall due to import competition. But too much emphasis has been placed in recent years on striking new trade agreements among limited groups of countries. The advantages of lowering trade barriers have become relatively marginal in recent years for the simple reason that those barriers have already fallen so far since the initiation of the modern trading system at the end of World War II. In the Asia Pacific, not just the Asia Pacific, but in regions all over the world, there's too much of a spaghetti bowl. Here it's called the noodle bowl. This only undermines the WTO further. I'm well aware of the argument that these kinds of agreements can be building blocks of global deals. The evidence, I think, points to exactly the opposite conclusion. They drain energy from the WTO, they create alternatives to it, and over time, that is bound to heighten the risk that member nations question the WTO's relevancy and ultimately its authority. Trade ministers, here I'm going to be a bit blunt, I think they're inclined to look for ways to make themselves relevant and keep themselves busy. And I would urge those of you from trade ministries or from economy ministries who have influence over trade ministries to restrain that urge. I don't mean to suggest that we ought to be aiming for another multilateral round as a single undertaking where nothing is agreed until all is agreed by all members of the WTO. We've seen that that's too ambitious. A much better way to go. We have limitations, but given those limitations would be plurilateral agreements under WTO auspices. These can be MFN-based or non-MFN-based. That is, the benefits can go to all of the countries in the WTO, or they can go to just those countries that abide by the terms. Either way, they should be within the WTO, under WTO auspices, and subject to WTO dispute settlement. They can be in sectors such as e-commerce, environmental goods, fishery subsidies, services. These are all topics that came up at the recent WTO ministerial in Buenos Aires, and I think that's a very welcome development. The economic benefits may not be all that huge of reaching agreements in these sectors, but they'll underpin multilateralism, they'll reinforce it instead of undermining it. Will this be enough if the system's most powerful members, and I'm thinking here again of the United States and China, don't do their part to hold the system together? Well, maybe not. But those powerful members can and should be encouraged by other members to do the right thing. Now, for example, obviously it'll be better if the United States addresses its grievances against China by bringing cases at the WTO instead of resorting to multilateralism. I'm sure the question that's occurring to some of you as I say that is, well, how can you encourage the U.S. to do the right thing, and I'm going to be real blunt here, when it's led by such a demonstrably volatile and unpredictable character? I mean, we just, yesterday, President Trump came out and said, I've decided to be a real nice guy about sanctions against the Chinese company ZTE. This was a complete flip-flop from where the administration had been before, and in fact, it was an intrusion in the rule of law in the United States. Who knows where what kind of mood he'll wake up in tomorrow? So how do you influence a government that is led by a person like that? Well, one thing that occurs to me is countries can join the U.S. in bringing disputes particularly against China. If your country agrees with the United States that a particular Chinese trade practice is unfair and violates WTO rules, tell the U.S. you'll join them in an action. That, believe me, that could have a fairly salutary effect on the U.S. on those in the U.S. Power structure who want to keep the U.S. within the multilateral system rather than blowing it up. In dispute settlement, often the appellate body has been accused of making its own law when it's faced with disputes where rules are ambiguous, and is an excellent proposal that's been advanced called legislative remand. It's a little technical, but when the appellate body is confronted with issues that involve legal uncertainty, it can submit those to WTO committees to discuss new rules that resolve the ambiguities. Full consensus can't always be reached in these situations, but there's a little-known rule in the WTO that a three-quarters majority vote can resolve ambiguities in rules. The point is not that this is going to solve all of the problems of the trading system, but the point is that devoting the energy of trade ministries to initiatives like that would be much healthier for the system than more regional or bilateral FTAs. In this regard, it's been very encouraging to see countries in the region refusing to go along with Trump's preference for striking bilateral deals between the United States and its trading partners. I think Japan really deserves a medal for resisting Trump's demands to go that route. But more is needed than that. And so to minimize the risk that the misadventures that we've had in the past turn into something much worse, I hope that the countries of this region will step up and take affirmative action to avoid actions that, however well-intentioned they may be, may harm the system that has done so much to promote prosperity and peace in the past 7 decades. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bluestein. Can we give another round of applause to all the speakers? We shall now open the floor to country statements. I would like to urge all speakers to help maintain the discipline of the 5-minute time allocation so that all delegations may have enough time to deliver their statements. I would like also to note that in case delegations have longer statements, they may deliver a summary while the full statement can be shared through the Commission website. The first speaker on my list is the Honorable Mr. Rimpu Pato, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Papua New Guinea. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, Chair Lady, colleague ministers from the UN ESCAP states, Your Excellency Shamshed Akhter, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations Executive Secretary for ESCAP, Excellencies, first of all, our deepest condolences to the people and the government of Indonesia for the terrorist attacks which has cost lives of people in that country. We in Papua New Guinea condemn terrorism of all forms. Secondly, we would like to wish well the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, Executive Secretary of ESCAP, for the excellent work that she's been doing. We wish her a happy retirement. How pleasant it is for me to be here in beautiful Kingdom of Thailand. Thank you, Thailand, for the wonderful welcome that you have accorded to my delegation, for which your country is so renowned. Thailand, of course, is a land of smiles. I often hear the same of my own country, Papua New Guinea. When visitors go to our islands that are embraced by pristine coral reefs, or fly up into the highlands to witness our flamboyant and fantastic dancing and costumes, they are greeted with smiling faces. Unfortunately, those smiles turned into sorrow this year as a massive earthquake shook places where they were not expected. The earthquakes of 7.5 and 6.6 on the Richter scale were very violent. We lost hundreds of precious lives, many people remain injured, hillsides collapsed, roads and bridges came tumbling down, and agricultural lands were made useless, and people suffer ongoing trauma. Fortunately for us, our generous international friends came rushing in with a supply of food and medical support, as well as tents and other essential equipment. But as those of you whose countries have suffered similar natural disasters know full well, recovery is a slow and painful process. It has affected our economy and cost us millions upon millions of dollars. I'm not telling you all this to evoke pity or even to seek assistance, but to put on this agenda in Bangkok the real and pressing need for our region, indeed the world, to prepare carefully and systematically for the natural disasters that we inevitably will face and will arrive in our countries. These disasters can threaten, even reverse, the gains we make in addressing the sustainable development goals that we've been talking for the whole day. In these disasters challenge our ability to effectively address the theme of this session, inequality in the era of the 2030 agenda of the Commission. Will SDG 17, namely strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development, stimulate our action to address this issue? It is time for a permanent standing organization to predict disasters, if possible to provide relief and to promote resilience and recovery. Let us contemplate this as we meet. Now let me turn back from the sorrows to smiles to show how, despite our tragedy, we are moving forward with determination to meet the joint vision and the pledge of the 2030 Agenda. We have domesticated 2030 Agenda into our medium-term development plan 2018 to 2022. First, let me describe our nation as we see it. Papua New Guinea, with some 8 million people, is the most populous nation of the Pacific Island states and is a bridge between Asia and the Pacific. We are blessed with vast tuna fisheries and rich agricultural land. But even though we have such resource and economic potential, most of our people are only on the first rung of the development ladder. You will be pleased to know that we are progressively incorporating SDG 2030 into our development strategies that we are implementing. The Paris Agreement, that's COP21, improving our road safety, adhering to the WTO commitments to which the learned speaker before me addressed, and we agree with some of the sentiments, particularly into pluralism that is addressed. All that, and also focusing on international infrastructure development. May I now, in my statement, tell you about our progress in preparation for the forthcoming APEC summit, which will take place in Port Moresby in November of this year. Preparations are going brilliantly. We look forward to the visit to our shores, the leaders of the APEC economies. We have invited the Pacific leaders also to attend this important meeting. Our experience at APEC is also a perfect platform for us to progress towards hosting next year the Asia-Pacific Forum, which we are lobbying to get the support of ESCAP to run in Papua New Guinea, and we hope that member states will support us because we will have the experience to do so after hosting APEC this year. Those few words, if we think about it, describe the themes we are actually addressing. That is the theme of APEC, increasing inclusive opportunities, embracing the digital future. Papua New Guinea views with inspiration and hope the work of ESCAP and its member states, the contributions of inspiring individuals, some of whom are here today and some of who are elsewhere toiling in the noble endeavor of development for our world. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Manan, Honorable State Minister of Finance, Bangladesh.
Madam Chairperson, Honorable Ministers, Madam Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all. In September 2015, all 93 member states of the United Nations adopted the historic 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development for achieving a better future for all, laying out a path over the next 15 years to end extreme poverty, fight inequality and injustice. Ironically, the 2030 Agenda was adopted at a time when the world was experiencing positive effects of globalization, technological progress, increased global trade and wealth, and reduction in numbers of absolute poor, with improved living conditions in many parts of the world. At the same time, contrary to the resounding slogan of leaving no one behind, it was evident that many people were being left behind. At the heart of the Agenda 2030 are the Sustainable Development Goals, which clearly define the world we want, applying to all nations and leaving no one behind. SDG has put substantive emphasis on reducing inequality among and within the countries. Reducing inequality is an important goal of SDG. To reduce inequality, three things we think should be given utmost emphasis in the context of Sustainable Development Agenda. These are economic development, human capacity improvement, and inclusive society. Madam Chairperson, inequality starts from economic injustice. Therefore, to ensure equality, it's our first and foremost task is to ensure equal economic development for all. Key inequalities are not merely about disparities in income. It is also about disparities in opportunities in terms of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, religion, and other socio-economic status. Human capacity development is a major policy tool to curb inequality. Inclusive society refers where no one can be left behind. Equal opportunity creation refers above all to a situation where everyone has an equal chance to improve. The SDG framework identifies inequality as a key issue to tackle and reduce inequality. It can therefore work towards achieving sustainability and universal well-being. Goal 10 has addressed different dimensions of inequality in other contexts. These are differences in political inclusion, discriminatory laws, discrimination in health, education opportunities for all. Among all targets in the goal, target number 10.7 states, I quote, facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned and well-managed immigration policies, unquote. Government of Bangladesh is playing its role towards attaining the goal stated above. To reduce inequality by promoting migration, Bangladesh has proposed a global compact on safe, orderly, and regional and regular migration. Globally, there is no governance mechanism as of now, and there is no framework to manage this migration. Bangladesh, therefore, proposes a global governance mechanism on migration, which will be fair to all states. Trade and investment are two other major key tools which play significant roles in curbing inequality. The 2030 SDA is underpinned by a global partnership, mobilizing governments and stakeholders at all levels. The scale of ambition of the new agenda requires a revitalized global partnership to ensure its implementation. This partnership will work in a spirit of global solidarity, in particular solidarity with the poorest and people in vulnerable situations. The means of implementation of targets under Goal 17 and other goals are key to implementing the Agenda 2030 as a whole. Strengthening the global partnership for sustainable development and multi-stakeholder partnerships is recognized as a core area of global partnership and solidarity. Excellencies, World Trade Organization was launched to play a pivotal role to address trade inequalities by establishing a universal, rule-based, open, non-discriminatory, and equitable multilateral trading regime. However, WTO is cutting a very sorry figure in the current world trade regime. In its last ministerial conference, WTO failed to come out with a declaration. Critics are saying it is a failure on the part of WTO. Developing countries must therefore unite to strengthen WTO to establish a rules-based trading system, which originally was the goal of WTO. So now time has come when inequality should not be seen among and within the countries only. It should be seen in its global context. The so-called fourth industrial revolution and the very real climate change are adding new dimensions in the field of growing global inequality. Digital divide is widening and increasing inequality across the globe. To curb this trend, internet governance should be more democratic and global. Those who lack capacity in this respect should receive technical assistance from those who are well ahead. Mr. Chairperson, in case of climate change, those countries that are already identified as climate vulnerable as per UNFCCC and climate-related organizations, ESCAP should strengthen support to these countries and extend technical assistance to them. Due to climate change consequences, countries are being affected in different ways in different situations. In fields of rights to livelihood, rights to water, sanitation, and other matters. Besides development of these activities, human rights are also issues of concern here. Livelihood is being affected by excessive heat because of the global weather change. Women are the most vulnerable in this group, as they cater to the most basic domestic needs of finding fuel and water. UNESCAP therefore should look for providing assistance in terms of technology transfer and in collaboration with other development agencies of the UN system. UNESCAP may therefore look to work closely to reduce inequalities among and within the region by working in hand with other UN agencies. Bangladesh is prepared to fulfill its role in this aspect. Having said this, I wish this conference a grand success and end by thanking you, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Hakim Ngoc, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vietnam.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, as the regional and global landscapes are experiencing complex and fundamental challenges, our discussion on strengthening international cooperation and multilateralism will help countries to further promote inclusive economic and social development. My delegation shares the view that regional and global economic recovery is progressing, but medium and long-term risks remain. Security challenges, climate change, and other global issues are increasingly posing profound impacts on development of different nations. Besides, disruptive technology advancements are transforming our societies. Maintaining sustainable and inclusive development in such a complex world is a big challenge in itself. Vietnam believes that the complexity of global challenges the international community facing requires a comprehensive and multilateral approach. In a globalized world today, no countries can address global challenges alone. The Asia-Pacific members, therefore, must recommit themselves to upholding multilateralism. Multilateral institutions, particularly the United Nations, play a vital role in fostering global and regional partnership towards achieving sustainable development goals. Vietnam calls upon all countries to do their part to support multilateral institutions, which are indispensable in our effort to address global challenges. The dynamic development of the Asia-Pacific region has been attached with peace, stability, and interconnection. Respect for and compliance with international law is crucial for the maintenance of sustainable peace globally and regionally. The Asia-Pacific region, therefore, must be a prime mover in strengthening the rule-based multilateralism. It is equally important that a stable and a predictable global economic environment is essential for sustainable development, particularly for developing countries. We support continued reform of multilateral institutions towards a more equal and balanced global economic governance that can respond better to development needs of developing countries. Trade is a powerful engine for economic growth and job creation, particularly in developing countries. My country, Vietnam, is a good case in point. We therefore call for strengthened and coordinated efforts at global, regional, and national levels to boost global and regional trade, including better market access for developing countries. The conclusion of the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, CPTPP, of which Vietnam is a member, is a significant effort in advancing rule-based, free, open, fair, transparent, and inclusive multilateral trade in the Asia-Pacific region. Madam Chair, last year in Vietnam, APEC leaders adopted practical action programs, including those on deepening regional economic integration, advancing economic, financial, and social inclusion, developing human resources in the digital age, etc. We reaffirm our commitment to work closely with APEC members and regional countries to bring these action programs into life to promote innovative growth, inclusion, and sustainable development in the Asia-Pacific region. In the Southeast Asian region, ASEAN is asserting its central role in building the regional security architecture. The ASEAN ways of unity and consensus has proven to be an effective tool to deal with challenges to regional peace and stability, as well as sustainable and inclusive development. Vietnam has been rendering active and responsible contribution to realization of the vision of a rule-based, people-oriented, and people-centered ASEAN community with vibrant, sustainable, and highly integrated economies. Last but not least, multilateral cooperation is also being expanded to better manage the sustainable use of the resources of the Mekong River, which have the potential challenges to sustainable development of riparian countries. We are grateful and expect Asia-Pacific countries to continue their support and cooperation in the sustainable use of water resources, promotion of water security, and respond to climate change in the Mekong River Basin. Once again, Vietnam reaffirms the commitment to supporting multilateralism in the Asia-Pacific region and the world to maintain sustainable peace and promote inclusive economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker on our list this afternoon is Mr. Oleg Shamonov, Minister, Counselor, and Deputy Permanent Representative to the ESCAP Embassy of the Russian Federation, Bangkok.
Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель. Проблематика многосторонности исключительно важная проблематика с точки зрения экономической, политической. И мы, конечно, не могли обойти ее стороной. И прежде всего хотели бы поблагодарить переводчиков за то, что они сочли возможным остаться еще на 10 минут с тем, чтобы перевести наше выступление. Это скорее комментарий, а даже не выступление. Но мы благодарим переводческую службу. Я даже сказал переводческую службу. Либерализация мировой торговли – это исключительно важная тема. С другой стороны, что мы видим в современном мире? Протекционизм, анахронизм с точки зрения того, на принципах чего была построена Всемирная торговая организация. Эти контрасты мы наблюдаем и на площадке ESCAP. Эти же контрасты мы видим в более широком контексте в Азиатско-Тихоокеанском регионе. Считаем это исключительно контрпродуктивным явлением. Следующее. Развитие сотрудничества, конструктивное в области торговли, энергетики, транспорта. Они важны не сами по себе, хотя это, естественно, очень важно. Но еще важнее то, что они дают синергетический эффект в выполнении повестки дня 2030 в частности. Мы бы хотели сослаться на те позитивные примеры, на те достижения, которые мы имеем, когда работаем вместе. Это, в частности, и развитие железнодорожного транспорта в азиатском регионе, в частности, межправительственное соглашение по трансазиатским железным дорогам. То же самое можно сказать о межправительственном соглашении по азиатским автомобильным дорогам. В этом же ряду региональная программа действий по устойчивому транспортной связуемости. Таким образом, совершенно очевидно, что у нас есть два противоположных вектора развития. Один изоляционистский, протекционистский, другой направленный на конструктивное развитие сотрудничества, интеграцию и взаимосвязуемость всех экономик региона. Выступая сегодня на пленарной сессии, Постоянный представитель Российской Федерации при ESCAP господин Барский говорил уже, что мир перестал быть монополярным. Это же действительно объективный факт. Развитие равноправного международного сотрудничества нельзя остановить желанием каких-то одних центров силы. А вот центров силы. А вот укреплению связуемости нет альтернативы. Вот именно на такой акцент в работе ESCAP мы рассчитываем. Развитие сотрудничества, кооперация, интеграция, связуемость. Вот то, что делает площадку ESCAP притягательной платформой взаимодействия. Вот то, что делает эту структуру практически востребованной государствами-членами. Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель.
Thank you, Mr. Samanov. Our next speaker is Ms. Rupa Dutta, Economic Advisor, Department of Commerce, India. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam. Madam Chair and distinguished delegates, India believes in the primacy of the multilateral trading system, which espouses the principles of transparency, predictability, non-discrimination, inclusiveness of growth, development, and is rules-based. As one of the founding members of the United Nations, India has been a leading advocate of multilateralism for over 70 years, including through the leadership positions within the Non-Aligned Movement, Group of 77 within UN, and through its leadership in South-South cooperation. India has taken a proactive role to lead and influence regional and international cooperation through platforms such as the SAARC, BIMSTEC, BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and many others. India's development cooperation and assistance at the international level has two broad strands. The first strand relates to development partnership with countries on a bilateral basis. The second strand refers to India's support for the United Nations and its specialized agencies. India has actively supported and shaped the UN system and made significant contributions to implementing the UN Charter and developing the UN's specialized programs, funds, and agencies. India is a member of multiple UN agency, global level executive boards, and governing bodies, including UNDP, UNFPA, UNICEF, etc. India is leading the path to a more proactive approach to multilateral engagements. This is occurring across a wide range of development, trade, infrastructure, connectivity, environmental issues, as well as those related to the new urban agenda. As the country develops further and its global role and influence grows, India will have increased collaboration with various bodies of the UN on a select number of issues, especially where the country feels it can contribute confidently and shape its historical focus on solidarity with other developing states and the global agenda. The outcome pertaining to India with respect to SDG is, by 2022, India's voice and participation in multilateral fora is increased on matters of peace, security, human rights, development, and emergency response. India's increasing support to multilateralism and the UN system will complement its bilateral assistance efforts and South-South and triangular cooperation initiatives. We continue to expand our development partnership over a wide range of sectors for capacity building with fellow developing countries across continents, and especially with those in more vulnerable situations in the spirit of South-South solidarity. In June 2017, we established the India-UN Development Partnership Fund with an aim to enhance our contribution to the South-South cooperation as means to achieve the Agenda 2030 of Sustainable Development. Through the IPSA Trust Fund, India, Brazil, and South Africa work with partners on implementing SDGs. In a decade of its very successful work, the Trust Fund has developed a portfolio of about 30 projects across 19 countries, majority of which are in LDCs. India believes that implementation of a truly universal agenda would need a platform where all countries have equal voice on the issues related to international taxation. We have consistently expressed our view that the UN Tax Committee should be strengthened and upgraded into an intergovernmental body. Excellency, it's my pleasure to inform you that India has made the first ever contribution to the Trust Fund on Tax Committee. And the quantum and range of South-South cooperation has significantly expanded over the past years. According to a recent release by WTO, world merchandise trade is expected to remain strong in 2018 and 19, following its largest increase in 6 years in 2017. Regarding the multilateral trading system, there is near unanimity on the need to preserve and enhance the functioning and credibility of the rules-based multilateral trading system. This has served us well in keeping trade open and fair. In this regard, with focus on universal, rules-based, open, non-discriminatory and equitable trading system, India had organized an informal WTO ministerial meet in March 2018. The existing trade agreements with ASEAN, Japan and Korea, as well as the ongoing engagement with countries in this region, is what has driven India's agenda on the trade front. Besides, the trade agreements complement the multilateral trading system since they provide an opportunity to leverage the core competency of the trading partners and go into specificities while seeking a higher ambition level. Physical connectivity, transport, energy, ICT connectivity, financial cooperation, infrastructure funding, disaster mitigation, and trade facilitation are some of the focus areas in facilitating and enhancing sustainable trade and growth. The issues related to these areas involve a number of ministries and regulatory agencies. These are areas which require broad-based consultations and dialogue and appropriate dialogue. Madam, I would like to conclude by saying that in present-day world, there are a number of challenges being faced by many countries due to rapid automation, borderless nature of technology, standards and regulatory frameworks. Many of these problems can be resolved through better cooperation amongst all the countries. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Tuta. Our next and final speaker for this afternoon is Mr. Eamon Murphy, Regional Director, UNAIDS Asia and the Pacific. You have the floor, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the honor of reading the statement on behalf of Mr. Murphy, the Regional Director of UNAIDS. Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. UNAIDS welcomes the ESCAP's theme topic for its 74th session of Inequality in the Era of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Inequalities affect all socio-economic aspects of development and are key drivers of new HIV infections. UNAIDS works with the most marginalized among us. Day to day, we see the negative impact of inequalities on all aspects of their lives and the increased vulnerabilities that push them further behind. We believe, however, that the HIV response model can also be transformed into a pathfinder for addressing structural inequalities and vulnerabilities in many different fields. When in September 2015, the world's leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, they pledged to leave no one behind. The agenda sets out a vision for sustainable development grounded in international human rights standards to ensure healthy lives and build inclusive societies. It puts respect for equality and non-discrimination at the center of its goals. UNAIDS applauds the call of Ms. Shamshad Akhtar, Executive Secretary of ESCAP, for greater investment in our people. Indeed, access to healthcare and education must be improved because only a healthy population can study, work, and become more prosperous. The universal basic healthcare schemes established by Bhutan, for example, and Thailand are success stories to build on. Universal means all, not some. That inclusiveness is essential to leave no one behind. Universal health coverage is defined as ensuring that all people obtain the health services they need of good quality without suffering financial hardship when paying for them. Universal basic health care schemes are much more than making a package of services available. The ultimate measure of our success must be whether the poorest, the most marginalized, and the most vulnerable people enjoy health and well-being. This requires ongoing upstream and assessing and addressing in specific contexts and for specific populations the causes of exclusion and ill health. It is time to address the critical linkages between health, injustice, inequality, poverty, and conflict. HIV and AIDS is an outstanding example of health condition that affect certain population groups disproportionately in terms of its health impact, but also its adverse socio-economic effects and overall progress in development. Addressing equity is central to the concept of UHC, making it a crucial consideration if we are to make any further progress in stopping new HIV infections and bringing an end to the AIDS epidemic. In order to leave no one behind, to access universal basic health care, legal and policy barriers has to be lifted. One massive barrier is the barrier that stigma and discrimination places on the most vulnerable people who seek access to health care. Discrimination in healthcare settings remain widespread and takes many forms. Discrimination prevents the attainment of universal basic health care. It leads to poor health outcomes and hampers efforts to end the AIDS epidemic and achieve healthy lives for all. Thailand has been a leading force in the region to tackle stigma and discrimination in healthcare settings, and UNAIDS applauds Thailand's leadership on this issue. Persistent gender inequalities and gender-based violence contribute to women's HIV risk and vulnerability. Evidence suggests that strategies to foster equitable gender norms, strengthen legal and policy frameworks, and support women's education, access to decision-making, employment opportunities, food and economic security have a meaningful impact on HIV and sexual and reproductive health outcomes and reduce gender inequality. Women and girls, particularly those living with HIV and from key populations, must be empowered to engage meaningfully and spaces must be secured for them to participate in the HIV response at all levels. Madam Chair, in 2016, countries agreed to a historic and urgent agenda to accelerate efforts towards ending the AIDS epidemic as a public health threat by 2030. The 2016 UN General Assembly political declaration on ending AIDS provided a global mandate to fast-track the AIDS response. The political declaration further recognized that progress in protecting and promoting the human rights of people living with HIV at risk of and affected by HIV have been far from adequate, and that human rights violations remain a major obstacle in the response to HIV. Member States pledged to review and reform legislation that may create barriers or reinforce stigma and discrimination, and to promote access to non-discriminatory healthcare services, including for populations at higher risk of HIV, specifically sex workers, men who have sex with men, people who inject drugs, transgender people, and prisoners. The political declaration affirms that AIDS response will spur progress across the entire 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It calls for universal health coverage and access to social protection. Adopting targets beyond HIV Member states emphasized the continued importance of an integrated approach to a range of health issues, including tuberculosis, hepatitis B and C, cervical cancer, non-communicable diseases, and emerging and re-emerging diseases. In January 2015, the Asia-Pacific Intergovernmental Meeting on HIV and AIDS took place here in Bangkok. One of the main goals of the meeting was to enhance regional cooperation to achieve universal access to HIV prevention, treatment, care, and support in Asia and the Pacific. The meeting endorsed the regional framework for action on HIV and AIDS beyond 2015. This included the continuation of national reviews and multi-sectoral consultations on legal and policy barriers, national stakeholder consultations to promote access to affordable medicines, diagnostics, and vaccines, and evidence-based national HIV investment cases and sustainability plans. Madam Chair, 11 months after the Asia-Pacific Intergovernmental Meeting on HIV and AIDS, ESCAP and UNAIDS jointly organized the Regional Expert Consultation on Developing Evidence-Based National HIV Investment Cases and Sustainability Plans. The consultation was attended by national-level experts from governments, civil society, as well as regional networks of civil society organizations, development partners, and representatives of the United Nations Regional Interagency Team on AIDS. Participating countries, including Bangladesh, Indonesia, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Thailand, underlined the need to ensure sustainability of AIDS response through an efficient use of existing resources, integration of HIV and AIDS services into universal health coverage schemes, and increase in multi-sectoral collaboration. They identified the need for active involvement of civil society organizations, effective advocacy, and increase in support from external development partners. They also raised the need to close service gaps in rural areas and to reduce out-of-pocket expenditure for people living with HIV. Through this joint UNESCAP and UNAIDS initiative, significant country-level work has been started. UNAIDS is determined to sustain the gains and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and UNAIDS remains firmly committed to support member states in their commitment to end AIDS by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for your statement. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying to the end of this session today. Before I request the Secretary of the Commission to make housekeeping announcements, I would like to thank Ms. Akhtar, our distinguished speakers, and all our delegates for a very thought-provoking and insightful discussion. Thank you to others who are out there listening and participating in these sessions today. Mr. Secretary, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few quick announcements. First, as you all know, and I think many of you participated, the elections this afternoon for the APC-ICT and CSAM governing councils were held between 2 and 4 o'clock. Balloting is done. Secretariat will be reviewing the ballots, and we will be announcing the new composition of the governing councils under the agenda item 10, other matters. So we'll keep you in suspense for a little while longer. Again, we wish to remind all delegations, if you have not done so, to please complete one of these assessment questionnaires and to deposit it into the box in the back of the room. And lastly, the most important announcement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reception tonight is at 6:30. The Ministry has kindly provided bus service between the UNCC and the Ministry. The first bus is leaving at 5:30, so if you hurry, you have, I think, 10 minutes to catch the first bus. The second bus will be leaving at 6 p.m. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Before closing, I would like to remind everyone that we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp here in the ESCAP hall. Thank you and enjoy your evening. The meeting is adjourned. Okay.